She was a viscount's daughter, sold to save her family from utter ruin. He was the Stone Duke, a man of immense wealth and chilling mystery, the man who owned her father's debts. The wedding was a cold transaction, but the wedding night was an insult. He stood in the doorway of her chamber, his eyes passing over her as if she were furniture. And then he turned, walked away, and locked the door to his own wing. She was left alone, a duchess in name, a prisoner in truth. But the secrets locked in Blackwood Manor were far more dangerous than a cold husband, and the man she married was not who he seemed to be. The air in the drawing-room of Ashworth Park was thick with the cloying scent of decay, not of the body, but of pride. The silk wallpaper, once a vibrant peony pink, had faded to a jaundiced grey, peeling near the ceiling, where a damp patch had bloomed like a dark heraldry. This was the house of Viscount Ashworth, and it, like its master, was collapsing. Lady Alara Ashworth stood by the window, her back rigid, tracing the crack in the glass with one slim finger. Outside, a miserable grey drizzle wept over the untended gardens. Inside, her father, Lord Ashworth, sat slumped in his chair, his face a ruin of stubble and sweat. Opposite him, utterly unmoved, sat the man who had caused this, Alastair, the Duke of Blackwood. He was a legend in the ton, and not a comfortable one. He had appeared in London 5 years prior, emerging from a self-imposed exile on his vast, remote estates in the north. He was impossibly wealthy, ruthlessly efficient, and utterly glacial. Men called him the Stone Duke. He attended no balls, hosted no parties, and was rumoured to have dismantled the finances of 3 separate rivals at Boodle's in a single evening, not out of sport, but as a correction. Now he sat in their ruined drawing-room. His boots, polished to a mirror shine, rested on a priceless Aubusson carpet, stained with a port wine spill that no one had bothered to clean. "The ledgers are clear, Ashworth." The Duke's voice was deep, devoid of inflection. It cut through the room like a shard of ice. "You wagered your remaining assets. You lost. The debt with interest now totals £90,000. Alara's father made a small, strangled sound. £90,000. They did not have 90 shillings. I cannot pay, Your Grace," the Viscount whispered, his eyes darting. "A temporary setback. A run of unfortunate—" "Silence!" Blackwood commanded. It was not a shout. It was a simple, flat statement, and it was more terrifying than any rage. The Viscount flinched as if struck. Blackwood's gaze, the colour of a winter sea, moved from the father to the daughter. He studied Alara. She met his look, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. But she refused to look away. She would not show this man her terror. He was assessing her, she realized, in the same way he had assessed the ledgers, as an asset, as a column in a book. "You have one other asset," the Duke said, his eyes still locked on hers. Lord Ashworth looked up, confused. My lands. They are mortgaged to the hilt, Your Grace. The house? No." The Duke stood, his tall frame blocking the weak light from the window. He was a man built of sharp angles, from his high cheekbones to the crisp cut of his Savile Row coat. "Your daughter." Alara went cold. Her father gaped. My daughter. Your Grace, I do not understand." "It is a simple proposal, Lord Ashworth. I require a duchess. An heir is expected of the title. Your daughter is of suitable breeding." You would marry her?" her father choked out, a grotesque flicker of hope dawning in his ruined face. "A marriage," the Duke corrected, "is a transaction. I will absorb your entire debt. I will settle a generous allowance on you and your wife. I will see to it that your younger daughter Miss Rosalind, has a proper season. The Ashworth name will be restored." He paused, letting the term settle in the dead air. "In exchange, Lady Ilara becomes my wife. Today." "Today?" Ilara finally spoke. Her voice was a dry rasp. The Duke turned his full attention to her. It was like being pinned by an entomologist. "I do not waste time, madam. My solicitors are waiting at the inn. The special license is in my pocket. Your family is saved from debtor's prison, from ruin, from disgrace." He tilted his head. "Or they are not. The choice, I believe, is yours." It was no choice. It was an execution. She thought of her mother, frail and lost in a laudanum haze since the debts began. She thought of her younger sister, Rosalind, whose gentle nature would be crushed by the poverty and shame that awaited them. She, Ilara, was strong. She could bear this. She lifted her chin. The man was a monster, a cold-hearted speculator who traded in human misery. But he was her only hope. "I will require my own lady's maid," she said, testing the bars of her new cage. A flicker of something, surprise, respect, passed over the Duke's face. It was gone in an instant. "Done. Have her pack. The carriage leaves in 1 hour for Blackwood Manor." "But the wedding," her father stammered, "will be conducted by the local vicar. Here." The Duke pulled a document from his coat. "In this room. Now." And so it was. The Reverend Baines was summoned, his hands trembling so badly he dropped the prayer book twice. Ilara's mother was roused, looking bewildered and weeping softly. Rosalind stood beside Ilara, her hand gripping her sister's, her face pale with fear. Ilara wore her only good dress, a deep blue velvet. She stood before the man who had just bought her. Alistair, the Duke of Blackwood, spoke his vows in that same, toneless, terrifying voice. When it was her turn, Ilara's voice was clear and steady. "I will." He slid a ring onto her finger. It was not a simple gold band. It was a massive, square-cut diamond, heavy and cold as a block of ice. It felt like a manacle. The vicar pronounced them man and wife. The Duke did not kiss his bride. He simply took her elbow. "It is time to leave, Duchess," he said. Ilara looked back one last time at her father, who was already pouring a drink with a shaky hand, and at Rosalind, who was crying openly. She tore her gaze away and walked out of the house her family had owned for 300 years, stepping into the black lacquered carriage that bore the Blackwood crest, the crest of the man who now owned her, body and soul. The journey to Blackwood Manor was 4 days long. They were 4 days of agonizing silence. The Duke's carriage was a marvel of engineering, sprung so perfectly that the ruts of the Great North Road were barely felt. It was upholstered in dark grey velvet, soft as sin, and outfitted with every possible convenience. It was also a cell. Alistair sat opposite her. He did not read. He did not look out the window. He simply was. A fixed point of stillness. He seemed to watch the world, and her, from a great internal distance. On the first day, Ilara, raised to be a polite hostess even in hell, attempted conversation. "The journey is smoother than I anticipated, Your Grace." He looked at her. His eyes were not cruel, she realized. They were worse. They were empty. "I abide no inefficiency." The conversation died. On the second day, she tried again. "Your estates are in the north, I understand, near the coast?" "Yes." After that, she gave up. She retreated into her own mind, into a cold, hard knot of humiliation and resolve. She had made her bargain. She would keep it. She was the Duchess of Blackwood. She would survive this. She would survive him. They stopped at inns chosen in advance. They were always the finest, and their arrival was always expected. A private dining parlour would be ready. The food was exquisite. Elara found she could barely swallow. The Duke ate with a methodical, detached focus. They were given separate, adjoining suites. Each night, Elara would lie awake, staring at the locked door between them, her body tense, waiting for a knock that never came. On the fourth evening, the landscape changed. The rolling hills and tidy farms gave way to a wild, raw beauty. The road climbed into moorland, purple with heather, and the air grew sharp with the tang of salt. The sea. Finally, the carriage began its descent. Blackwood Manor appeared below them, and Elara's heart, which she thought had become incapable of sinking further, dropped. It was not a house. It was a fortress. It was a vast, imposing structure of grey-black stone, clinging to a sheer cliff overlooking the North Sea. It was magnificent, terrifying, and utterly unwelcoming. It had one central, Gothic-style block, and two great wings that seemed to stretch out like a bird of praise, shielding the house from the brutal winds. As they approached, Elara saw that the windows in the entire east wing were dark, not just unlit, but shuttered from within. The carriage rolled to a stop in a perfect gravel courtyard. A line of servants stood waiting on the steps, still as statues. They were all dressed in severe black and grey. At their head was a woman who was a perfect reflection of the house, tall, gaunt, and made of granite. The Duke stepped out and turned, offering Elara his hand. His touch was cold, even through her glove. He led her up the steps. "Mrs. Finch," he said to the gaunt woman, "this is the Duchess. She will require whatever she requires. See to it." Mrs. Finch, the housekeeper, looked at Elara. There was no welcome in her eyes, only a deep, unsettling loyalty to the man beside her. "Your Grace," she said, her voice a dry rustle. She curtsied, a sharp, angry crack of her knees. "Her Grace's new maid, Anne, has been shown her quarters," Mrs. Finch continued, speaking only to the Duke. "The West Wing apartments have been prepared as you ordered." "Very good," Alistair said. "Dinner will be at 8, in my study." He then turned and walked into the house, leaving Elara standing on the steps with the housekeeper. The humiliation was so profound, it was almost surreal. Mrs. Finch turned to her. "If you will follow me, Your Grace, I will show you to your rooms." The rooms were an apartment, a vast, opulent sitting room, a cavernous dressing room, and a bedchamber so large it could have housed her entire family. The furniture was priceless, heavy, and dark. A fire roared in the grate, but it did nothing to warm the chill that had settled into Elara's bones. Her new maid, Anne, a nervous, red-cheeked girl the Duke's agent had hired in London, helped her unpack and dress for dinner. Elara chose a gown of pale green silk. It felt like armour. But dinner was not served. At 8, Anne curtsied and left. Elara waited. At 9, her stomach growled, but her pride kept her seated. At 10, the silence of the house was absolute, broken only by the distant, mournful crash of the waves. He had forgotten her. On their wedding night. No, he had not forgotten. This was a statement. She was a piece of property, stored where he had ordered. A cold, white-hot rage began to build in her. She would not be stored. She rose, her silk skirts whispering, and walked out of her apartment. The West Wing corridor was silent, lit by gas lamps that hissed softly. She walked toward the main hall, toward the center of the house, where she presumed his study must be. She found him. The heavy oak doors to the library were open. He was not in a study. He was standing before a massive fireplace, one arm resting on the marble mantel, staring into the flames. A decanter of brandy and a single untouched glass sat on a table beside him. He had not eaten either. He heard her. He turned, slowly. His face, in the firelight, was a mask of cold control. "You are not in your rooms," he stated. "You did not come for me," she countered, her voice shaking only slightly. "You said dinner was at 8. I am not hungry. And I? Am I to starve, Your Grace? Or am I simply not part of the transaction now that the papers are signed?" He looked at her for a long time. The silence stretched, filled only by the fire and the sea. He seemed to be at war with himself. His jaw was so tight it must have ached. "This marriage," he said finally, his voice rough, "is a contract. It will provide you with a title, wealth, and safety. It will provide me with a duchess. That is all." He walked past her. He did not brush her. He did not pause. He simply moved, a force of nature, toward the grand staircase. Elara turned to watch him. And the air you spoke of?" she asked, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. He stopped, his hand on the newel post. He did not turn around. "That duchess will not be required. You have your rooms. I have mine." He ascended the stairs. Elara remained, frozen. But the night was not over. She returned to her chambers, the green silk dress feeling like a fool's costume. The humiliation burned deeper than the rage. Anne had laid out a nightgown, a delicate thing of lace and lawn that seemed like a cruel joke. Elara put it on and climbed into the massive cold bed. She must have dozed because she woke with a start. The handle of her bedroom door was turning. The door opened. Alistair stood there. He was in a dark velvet dressing gown. His hair was slightly mussed, as if he had been running his hands through it. He looked not cold, not empty. He looked tormented. He stepped into the room. Her heart stopped. He walked to the foot of her bed and simply looked. His eyes traced her face, her shoulders, the lace at her throat. A muscle in his jaw jumped. He took a step closer. Ilara's breath caught. She was terrified. She was not terrified. She was waiting. He reached the side of the bed. He raised a hand slowly, as if it were immensely heavy. He was going to touch her. His fingers hovered, trembling slightly, just inches from her cheek. His eyes were black with an emotion she could not name. It was not lust, it was anguish. And then, as if her skin were flame, he recoiled. He snatched his hand back. A look of profound self-loathing twisted his features. "No," he whispered. It was not to her. It was to himself. He turned, his movements jerky, violent. He strode from the room. He did not just close the door. He pulled it shut with a resounding click. And then, from the hallway, Elara heard another sound. The sound of a key turning in a lock. Not her door. A different one. A heavy, metal-on-metal sound. He had not locked her in. He had locked himself out. She sat up in the massive bed, her heart pounding. The sound had come from the corridor, leading to the shuttered, silent east wing. The Duke of Blackwood, her husband, had come to her bedchamber, stared at her with the eyes of a damned man, and then walked away, sealing himself inside a different part of the house. Elara pulled the covers up to her chin, but she was no longer cold. She was burning with 1,000 questions. This was not a man who felt nothing. This was a man who felt everything, and he had walked away without a word. The days that followed settled into a bizarre, suffocating routine. Elara was, in every material sense, a duchess. In every other sense, she was a ghost. Her mornings were spent with Anne, choosing gowns she would wear for no one, to walk in rooms no one entered. Mrs. Finch managed the household with terrifying precision. Meals were served to Elara in a small, sunny breakfast room. She ate alone. The food was exquisite. She began to suspect the Duke subsisted on air and vengeance, for she never saw him. The staff, a small skeleton crew, moved like shadows, their eyes averted. They were polite, but distant. They were his people, loyal to the core. Ilara was an outsider, an ornament, the transaction. Her husband, she learned from a nervous footman, spent his days and most of his nights in the East Wing. The East Wing. It was a forbidden territory. A heavy locked door at the end of the main gallery separated it from the rest of the manor. Mrs. Finch was the only one, other than the Duke, who possessed a key. She would disappear through it once a day, bearing a tray, and emerge an hour later, her face even more severe. Ilara was a prisoner, but her cage was gilded, and its boundaries were vast. She began to explore. The West Wing was hers. The main house was a public space. She spent hours in the library, a magnificent two-story room filled with thousands of books, all bound in dark, rich leather. She ran her fingers along the spines, pulling out volumes of poetry, history, and science. A deep layer of dust covered most of them. The room was not used. She discovered the ballroom, its chandeliers shrouded in holland cloth, the furniture like pale ghosts under their white sheets. She found the portrait gallery. Here, the Blackwood ancestors stared down at her, a long line of severe, dark-haired men and their pale, watchful wives. At the very end of the hall was a new-looking portrait. It was not of Alistair. It was of a woman. She was beautiful, with hair the colour of midnight and eyes that held a profound, heart-breaking sadness. She was standing by a window, a cello leaning against her chair. Underneath, a small brass plaque read, "Leonora, Duchess of Blackwood, Alistair's mother." Ilara stared at the portrait for a long time, or the sadness in those painted eyes felt familiar. This house, it seemed, was a place where duchesses came to be sad. She turned her attention to the East Wing. She began to watch the door. She would sit in the main gallery, a book open on her lap, and just watch. One afternoon, she heard it. The key turning. Mrs. Finch emerged, her face set. Ilara did not hesitate. "Mrs. Finch." The housekeeper paused, startled. She did not like being spoken to unannounced. "Your Grace." "I was wondering," Ilara said, her voice light. "What is in the East Wing? It seems such a waste to keep half the house shuttered." Mrs. Finch's eyes, the colour of faded slate, narrowed. "The East Wing is the Duke's private domain, Your Grace. It is where he conducts his business. It is not suitable for a lady." "Not suitable?" Ilara pressed, infusing her tone with the barest hint of iron. "Am I not the lady of this house? Am I not the Duchess?" The housekeeper took a small step closer. She was not intimidated. "You are the new Duchess, madam. The old one, the Duke's mother, Lady Leonora. The East Wing was her wing. After the tragedy, the Duke sealed it. He is the only one who goes there. He does not like to be disturbed. Ever." "Tragedy." The word hung in the air. "What tragedy?" Ilara asked. "It is not my place to say." Mrs. Finch's face was a locked door. "Your dinner will be served at 7. She turned and walked away, her black skirts hissing. Ilara was left with more questions. A tragedy. His mother. The cello. She returned to her rooms, frustrated. She needed a connection to the outside world. She had not been permitted to write to her family. "The post from here is unreliable," Alistair had informed her, via a note delivered by Mrs. Finch. "It is not secure." Another bar on the cage. That night, Ilara was sorting through the last of her trunks, the few meagre possessions she had brought from Ashworth Park. Tucked inside her writing desk, she found something she had forgotten she'd packed. It was a letter. not to her. It was a letter she had retrieved from her father's desk the day of the wedding, thinking it was housekeeping related. Her fingers had closed around it, and in the chaos she had slipped it into her pocket. She unfolded the single sheet of paper. It was written on thick, creamy vellum, embossed with the crest of a minor baron. It was dated 2 days before her wedding. My dear Ashworth, do not lose your nerve, man. Blackwood is a cold fish, but he is just a man. He has a weakness for the tables, just like us. I have it on good authority that his shipping ventures in the East are overextended. He is desperate for capital. Press him. Double the wager. 1 more game. He will fold, I promise you, and all our troubles will be over. Trust your oldest friend. Yours, Vance. Ilara sank onto the nearest chair, the letter trembling in her hand. Vance. Lord Percival. Vance. A man her father had always called his oldest friend. A man Ilara had always distrusted. He was too smooth, his smile too bright, his eyes too knowing. He has a weakness for the tables, but Alistair hadn't. He had played her father with surgical precision. He had not been desperate. He had been the predator. Double the wager. Vance had pushed her father into the final, ruinous bet. He had encouraged him to wager against a man he knew her father couldn't beat. He had, in essence, loaded the gun and pointed it at his friend's head. But why? A cold dread, far deeper than the fear of her husband, began to creep into Ilara's heart. Lord Vance had been a suitor of hers, 2 seasons ago. She had rejected him, politely but firmly. He had not taken it well. Alistair hadn't ruined her father. He had merely been the instrument, the architect of her family's destruction, the man who had set the entire terrible chain of events in motion, was Lord Percival Vance. And her husband, her cold, distant, silent husband. What did he know of this? She suddenly recalled the Duke's face at the wedding, that flat, toneless voice. The choice is yours. She had thought he was the devil in the transaction. But what if he was just the collector? What if the real devil was still out there? And what if her new husband knew it? That night, Ilara did not go to bed. She sat in the dark, the letter from Vance on her lap, and she thought. She replayed every moment. The transaction, the journey, the wedding night, his hand trembling as it reached for her, the look of anguish, the whispered, no. That was not the act of a man who felt nothing. That was the act of a man holding himself back, the East Wing, where he works, where his mother. She had to know. She waited until she heard the manor clock strike 2. The house was submerged in a profound, maritime silence. She slipped out of her room, shoeless, clad only in her dressing gown. The main gallery was dark, moonlight striping the floor through the tall windows. She reached the locked door to the East Wing. She had no key. She ran her fingers along the ornate carving of the doorframe. Nothing. Defeated, she was about to turn back when she heard it. It was faint, so faint she thought it was the wind at first. But it was too perfect, too structured. It was music, a cello. It was a low, mournful, achingly beautiful melody. A Bach suite, she thought, played with a technical perfection that was staggering, but also with a raw, desperate passion. It was coming from behind the locked door. She pressed her ear against the thick wood. The music was clearer now. She could hear the slide of fingers on the strings, the resinous pull of the bow. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated grief. She stood there, mesmerized, for half an hour. The music played on, a soliloquy of sorrow. Then it stopped. Not a clean end, but an abrupt, scraping dissonance, as if the player had suddenly broken. A moment of silence, and then a new sound. A crash, the sound of a glass breaking, a muffled, terrible curse. Ilara jumped back, her heart in her throat. Silence returned. But it was a different kind of silence now. It was heavy, and it was wounded. She fled back to her rooms, her mind racing. Mrs. Finch had lied. The East Wing wasn't just a place of business. It was a shrine, a place of mourning. And the man playing that music, the Stone Duke, was a man in agony. The next evening, Ilara did not wait in her apartment. She dressed in her boldest gown, a deep crimson velvet, and went down to the main library. She lit a fire, poured herself a glass of sherry, and sat down to wait. At 8:30, he appeared. Alistair stopped dead in the doorway. He was in his shirt sleeves, his waistcoat unbuttoned. He looked exhausted. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his hair was uncharacteristically messy. He was holding a stack of papers. He had clearly not expected to find her there. "Your Grace," Ilara said, her voice smooth, "you are late for dinner." Again. He stared at her. "What are you doing here?" "I am waiting for my husband. I am told it is a customary wifely duty." She took a sip of her sherry. "Will you join me? Or must I dine alone again?" A war was happening behind his eyes. He was calculating. "I have work to do." "Ah, yes, the work." Ilara stood. She was tired of being a ghost. The work that requires a cello, apparently. His head snapped up. The air in the room became brittle, dangerous. "You will go to your room." "No," she said. She was terrified, but she stood her ground. "I will not. I am your wife, Alistair. Not your prisoner. Not your business associate. Your wife. And you will tell me what is happening in this house." "You know nothing," he said, his voice dropping to a low growl. He took a step into the room. "You know nothing of my business." "I know," she said, her voice dropping to match his. "About Lord Percival Vance." That stopped him. It was as if she had struck him. He went utterly, terribly still. The colour drained from his face, leaving behind a stark, white mask. "What?" he said, and the word was not a question, it was a razor. "Did you say?" She held up the letter. "I found this. He pushed my father. He orchestrated my family's ruin. He is the reason I am here." Alistair looked at the letter, then at her. The control he held over himself was terrifying. "Give me that." "No, not until you talk to me." She held it tighter. "Why, Alistair? Why did you agree to this transaction? You didn't ruin my father. You just collected. Why me? Why this charade?" He crossed the room in 2 strides. He did not grab for the letter. He grabbed her. His hands clamped down on her upper arms, his grip like iron. He was shaking. Not her. He was shaking. "You think this is a charade?" he hissed, his face inches from hers. The smell of brandy and something else, something clean like the sea, washed over her. "You think this is a game? Then what is it?" she cried, her own control breaking. "Why did you marry me just to lock me away? Why did you come to my room on our wedding night, looking like a man on his way to the gallows, and then leave?" His grip tightened. His eyes. Oh, his eyes. They were not empty. They were full of rage, of pain, and of something she dared not name. "Because I am my father's son," he roared, and the sound was so full of pain it echoed in the vast room. He released her, shoving her back so roughly she stumbled. He turned away, breathing hard, running his hands through his hair. Because I am cursed," he whispered, the fight gone, leaving only a vast, empty exhaustion. My mother, Leonora. She was like you, full of light, full of life. And my father, he was a good man, but he was weak. He got involved with the wrong people." Ilara, rubbing her arms, watched him, her anger draining, replaced by a cold premonition. "Who?" she whispered. Alistair turned, his face a tragedy. A man. A friend. A man who encouraged him to make one more wager. A man who bled him dry, took his lands, his pride, and when my father was ruined, utterly broken, this man, what did he do? He offered to forgive the debt, in exchange for my mother. Ilara's blood turned to ice. "Oh God, my father," Alistair said, his voice dead, "refused. He chose honor. He took his own life. My mother, she found him. She was never the same. She came here, to this house, and she shut herself in the East Wing. She played her cello. For 10 years, she played, until she just faded. She died of a broken heart when I was 15. He looked at Ilara, his eyes burning. The man who did this, the man who destroyed my family, it was Lord Percival Vance." Ilara sank into the chair. It was all so much worse. "And I," Alistair continued, his voice a low, obsessive thrum, "I swore on my father's grave, on my mother's, that I would spend my life, my fortune, every breath, to destroying him. Not just him, his entire network, the men who prey on the weak, the men who deal in ruin. I have spent the last 10 years building my fortune, my power, for one purpose. To hunt. The East Wing," Ilara breathed. "It's not a shrine. It's your war room. It is my vow," he said. "It is my whole life." He looked at her, his face ravaged. "And then you, your father, another one of Vance's victims. Vance was circling. He wanted your father's land, yes. But he wanted you. I heard the whispers at Boodle's. He was obsessed with you. He was setting your father up for the same fall. To ruin him and then to take you as payment." Ilara felt sick. "So I stepped in," Alistair said. "I bought the debt. I ruined him first. I forced the marriage. To protect me," Ilara realized. "You married me to save me from him." "I married you," he said, his voice breaking, "to put you in a cage where he could not get to you, to hide you. Here, where I could protect you." The final piece clicked into place. "The wedding night," she whispered, looking at him, really seeing him for the first time. "You walked away, not because you didn't want me, but because because I am poison," he finished, his voice raw. "Because I am consumed by this vengeance. It is all I am. I looked at you, and you were innocent. You were light. And I am my mother's son. I am my father's son. I am darkness. I would not touch you. I would not infect you with my disease." He had walked away not from cruelty, but from a profound, agonizing, and misguided sense of protection. He was not a cold-hearted monster. He was a man in a self-made prison, haunted by the ghosts of his parents. "Alistair," she said, standing, her voice shaking. "No." He held up a hand. He was rebuilding his walls, brick by brick. The Stone Duke was returning. "You know, now you will stay in your wing. You will be safe. You will not come to the East Wing. You will not speak of this. You are the Duchess of Blackwood. That is all." He turned and walked out of the library, his back rigid. But this time, Ilara did not see a cold duke. She saw a lonely, terrified man, and she was his wife. The confession, as explosive as it was, changed everything and nothing. On the surface, their lives returned to the cold, silent routine. Alistair vanished back into the East Wing. Mrs. Finch continued to manage the house. Ilara continued to take her meals alone. But underneath, the foundations of the house had shifted. The silence was no longer empty. It was charged. When Elara looked at the door to the east wing, she no longer saw a barrier. She saw a quest. She saw her husband. He was trying to protect her. He thought she was a fragile, porcelain thing to be locked away for her own safety. He had bought her, yes, but not for his own pleasure. He had bought her to save her from a fate far worse. He was wrong about her. She was not a porcelain doll. She was a viscount's daughter who had stared down ruin. She was the woman who had traded her life for her family. She was steel, and she was, she realized with a jolt, the only person in this world who was on Alistair's side. She could not breach the east wing. Not yet. He had locked it against her, as much as against the world. But she could arm herself. She could learn. She returned to the library. This time she was not a ghost. She was a scholar. Alistair had said Vance had a network. He said he was hunting. This was not a simple, personal vendetta. This was a war. She started not with poetry, but with the archives. The Blackwood estate, like her own, had decades of ledgers. She pulled them. She read them. She learned about shipping, about investments, about land management. Alistair's inefficiency remark was an understatement. The man was a genius. He had not just rebuilt his family's fortune, he had tripled it. He had created a financial fortress. She found maps. She found newspapers. She cross-referenced names. She began to see patterns. A land deal in Cornwall went sour, and the owner, a rival of Vance's, mysteriously drowned. A shipping company in Liverpool went bankrupt after its ledgers, managed by a man known to play cards at Vance's club, were lost in a fire. Alistair was not just avenging his father. He was dismantling a criminal empire. A week after the confession, Alistair left the manor. It was abrupt. Mrs. Finch informed Elara at breakfast. "The Duke has been called to London on urgent business, Your Grace. He will be gone a fortnight." Elara's blood ran cold. London. Where Vance was. "Was he? Did he seem—" "The Duke is the Duke, madam," Mrs. Finch said, her face impassive, but her hands, Elara noted, were clenched tightly in her apron. She was worried. "Thank you, Mrs. Finch," Elara said. The moment the housekeeper was gone, Elara moved. "He will be gone a fortnight." She walked to the door of the east wing. It was locked. Of course it was. But Alistair was gone. Mrs. Finch was in the kitchens. Elara examined the lock. It was a heavy, old, intricate thing. A master key would be, where? Mrs. Finch's office. It was a small, severe room off the main hall. Elara had never entered it. She slipped inside. It was immaculate. A large iron ring of keys hung on a hook by the desk. Her hand trembled as she took them. There were dozens. She returned to the east wing door. The third key she tried scraped. The fourth turned. With a groan of old, unoiled hinges, the door to the east wing opened. Elara stepped inside. It was not dark. The shutters were not drawn here. In fact, it was the brightest part of the house, a long gallery lined with windows facing the sea. But the air was thick with obsession. This was not a shrine to his mother. His mother's cello, she saw, was in the corner, covered in a cloth. The rest of the space was a war room. Massive tables were covered in maps, not of England, but of London, of Mayfair, of the city. Strings of red yarn connected townhouses to clubs, clubs to banks, banks to shipping offices. The walls were lined with ledgers. Not Blackwood ledgers. These were copies, the ledgers of dozens of other families. And one wall, one entire wall, was dedicated to Lord Percival Vance. There was a drawing of him, a charcoal sketch that captured his handsome, smiling, empty features. Around it were notes, newspaper clippings and names. Names: Lord Albright, deceased; Sir Robert Cole, bankrupt; the Stratford estate, acquired by Vance; Thomas Marlowe, jailed. And near the bottom, a new addition: Viscount Ashworth, contained. Beneath that, in Alistair's sharp, precise hand, Ilara. Safe. Ilara touched the note. He had not married her and forgotten her. She was part of his plan, the safe part. She walked deeper into the wing. This was where he lived. There was a small camp bed in the corner, a desk covered in letters, and a file, a thick file, separate from the others. It was labelled Leonora. Ilara's hands trembled, but she opened it. It was not letters from his mother. It was a medical file. Doctor's notes. Notes from a Dr. Matthias in Switzerland. She read. The Duchess's melancholy is profound. She speaks of the dark man. She will not eat. Her grief is a living thing. And then, a single sheet of paper. A confession. It was not from a doctor. It was from a groom, a man named Thomas Marlowe. The same name from the wall. I swear before God. Lord Vance paid me. He paid me 50 gold sovereigns. He said to spook the Duke's horse. The old Duke. He just wanted to scare him, he said, to put the fear of God into him. But the horse, it went over the cliff. It wasn't meant to be like that. He said my family would be safe if I kept quiet. He got me a job in Liverpool. Ilara dropped the paper. Her heart. She couldn't breathe. Alistair's father had not taken his own life. He had been murdered. Vance hadn't just ruined him. He had killed him. A new, terrible sound. A carriage in the courtyard. Ilara froze. He's back. He wasn't gone a fortnight. He was gone a day. She heard the front door slam. She heard his voice, not cold, but furious. "Finch, where is she?" Ilara ran from the east wing, leaving the door open, the key still in the lock. She ran down the gallery, the confession from Thomas Marlowe still clutched in her hand. She met him at the top of the stairs. Alistair. He was covered in mud. There was a split on his lip, bleeding. His eyes were wild. He saw her. He saw the paper in her hand. He saw the open door to the east wing behind her. His face. The mask of the Stone Duke didn't just crack. It shattered. "Ilara," he choked out, his voice a rasp of pure terror. You were not supposed to. God, no. You went to London," she stammered. "To find Marlowe," he yelled. "To get this." He held up a matching piece of paper. "I found him. Vance's men found me. I had to. Ilara, you must leave. Now, leave?" "He knows," Alistair said, grabbing her arm, pulling her toward the west wing. "Vance knows I have the confession. He knows I moved on your father's debt. He knows I married you. He knows you protected me. He knows I took you from him," Alistair said, his eyes frantic. "And now he knows I have the proof to hang him. He is a cornered animal, Ilara, and he is coming. He is coming here." The terror that should have frozen Ilara did not. Instead, a strange, crystalline clarity settled over her. The fear was there, a cold stone in her stomach, but the man in front of her, this wild, bleeding, terrified man, needed her. This was not the Stone Duke. This was Alistair, and he was her husband. "No," she said. He stopped, his hand still on her arm. "What? Ilara, this is not a game. He has men. He is a monster. And I am the Duchess of Blackwood," she said, her voice shaking but gaining strength. She pulled her arm from his grasp, not to flee, but to stand. "This is my house. You will not send me away. I married you to keep you safe, he roared, his desperation making his voice crack. You married me, Alistock. You made a transaction. But you lied to me, Alistair. You lied from the moment I met you. I lied to protect you. You lied about everything, she cried, her own emotions, so long suppressed, boiling over. You let me believe you were a cold-hearted brute who collected daughters for payment. You let me believe my father was a fool, not a victim. You let me believe your father was a coward. She held up the confession. This changes everything. This isn't just vengeance for ruin, Alistair. This is justice. For murder. The fight went out of him. He stumbled back, leaning against the wall, and slid down until he was sitting on the top step, his head in his hands. The great, powerful Duke of Blackwood. Broken. He told me my father was weak, Alistair whispered, his voice muffled. For 10 years. Vance says he even sent condolences. He said my father was a good man, but too proud for his own good. He planted the idea, and I believed him. I was a child. I believed my father, abandoned me, abandoned my mother. Oh, Alistair, Ilara whispered, sinking to the step beside him. She did not touch him. Not yet. I hated him, Alistair said, his voice a raw wound. I loved him, but I hated him for his weakness. I built all of this. He gestured to the house, the east wing, to be strong, to be stone, so I would never be weak like him, so I would never feel. Because feeling is what destroyed my mother, and I was wrong. He looked up at her. His eyes, the color of the sea, were drowning. He wasn't weak. He was murdered. And I have been avenging the wrong crime. I've been a fool. You were a boy, Ilara said, her voice firm. A boy who was manipulated by a monster. You are not a fool. You are the only man who has ever seen Lord Vance for who he truly is. You are the only one who can stop him. He looked at the paper in her hand, and then at the one in his. Marlowe. I found him in a debtor's prison in Fleet. Vance had him silenced. I got him out. He is safe. He will testify. I have it all, Ilara. Then it's over, she said, relief washing through her. No, he said, standing abruptly. The Duke was returning, but it was a different man. The stone was still there, but it was not a wall. It was a weapon. It's not over. I have a letter from one of my men in London. Vance left his club an hour after I did. He's not headed for the authorities. He's not headed for Dover. He's on the Great North Road, with at least 4 men. Ilara stood. He's coming here. He's coming for the confession, Alistair said, his voice flat. And he's coming for you, to finish what he started, to take what he believes is his. How long do we have? A day, maybe 2. His carriage is fast, but mine is faster. I rode the last 20 miles. I didn't... You didn't know I would be in the East Wing, she finished. You didn't know I would... No. You came here to get me. To run. I came here to send you to Switzerland, he said, his voice dead. To Dr. Matthias, the only man I trust. I was going to wait for Vance. Alone. You were going to get yourself killed, she accused. I was going to see this ended. No, Ilara said. We will see this ended. We. He stared at her. The word hung in the air. We. Ilara. You said, on our wedding night, that this marriage was a contract. You would provide me with safety. She took a step toward him. And I am your Duchess. I am not your mother, Alistair. I am not a beautiful, fragile thing that will fade. I will not hide in a wing of this house and die of a broken heart. I am your partner, if you will have me." He looked at her, truly looked at her strength, at the fire in her eyes, at the steel in her spine. He had married her to protect her, a convenience to keep her safe. He had seen her as an asset. He had been so wrong. She was his equal. Slowly, as if it was the most painful, most profound act of his life, he raised his hand. The same hand that had trembled by her bed on their wedding night. This time it did not hover. His fingers, calloused from riding, cold from the journey, brushed her cheek. A jolt, more powerful than fear, shot through her. "Elara," he whispered. Her name. Not Duchess. Not Madam. Elara. I have been alone. My entire life," he said. The darkness. "Vance, I thought it was mine to carry." "Not any more," she whispered, leaning into his touch. He closed his eyes. The tension, the years of solitary rage and grief seemed to drain from him. When he opened them, the Stone Duke was gone. Only Alistair remained. "He is coming," Alistair said, his voice clear, decisive. "He thinks he is coming to a house with a ruined duke and his terrified little bride. He thinks he is coming to collect." "And what will he find?" Elara asked, her own strength rising to meet his. Alistair's hand moved from her cheek to her hand. He interlaced his fingers with hers. His grip was firm, warm. "He will find the Duke and Duchess of Blackwood. He will find his end." He pulled her, gently but firmly. "Come. There is much to do, and Mrs. Finch is an excellent shot." They did not run. They prepared. Blackwood Manor, Alistair explained, was a fortress, and its staff, including a rifle-wielding Mrs. Finch, were loyal. The war room became a command centre. Alistair and Elara worked as partners, his coldness replaced by a commander's focus, and her fear by a steel resolve. They were a team. At dawn, Lord Vance arrived, demanding Elara. "I am exactly where I belong," Elara called down from the gallery, "with my husband." Enraged, Vance's men attacked. Mrs. Finch fired a warning shot, downing one man. Seeing Elara, Vance shrieked, "If I cannot have her, no one will," and aimed his pistol directly at her. "No!" Alistair yelled, but Elara was faster. She hurled a heavy bookend, striking Vance's arm as the gun fired, sending the shot wide. Alistair was on him in an instant, a brutal, fast fight that ended the threat for good as Vance's other men surrendered. Alistair took the stairs 2 at a time, pulling Elara into a desperate embrace. "I married you to hide you," he panted, "but you fought with me." "I am your wife, Alistair," she said. "My everything," he whispered, and finally kissed her, not as a transaction, but as his equal, his partner. Their marriage at last had truly begun. The Stone Duke had locked his heart away, just as he had locked the east wing of his manor. He married Elara to save her from a villain, but he never expected her to save him. She wasn't a fragile prize to be hidden. She was the partner he never knew he needed. Theirs wasn't a marriage of convenience or ruin. It became a marriage of purpose. They defeated the villain, but more than that, they defeated the ghosts that haunted Blackwood Manor. And that wedding night, when he walked away without a word, it was just the cold, dark beginning of a love story that would set them both free. What did you think of Elara's bravery? And Alistair's incredible, secret-filled past? If you loved this story of drama, mystery, and hard-won romance, please show your support. Hit that like button so I know you want more tales like this. Share this video with a friend who loves a good historical drama and, most importantly, hit subscribe, and ring that bell. You won't want to miss the next story we unspool. Thank you for listening.